It is Monday, July 31st, 2017 at 1 o'clock Eastern Time, and this is Admissions Live. I am your host, Adam Castro, and on today's live broadcast, we'll be talking with Dr. Liz Gross about social listening. If your campus is still working on a social media strategy, I am sorry to say that you're about to get lapped, and Liz is going to tell us why. Social listening is a fascinating topic, and Liz is great at breaking it down to easily digestible nuggets. Admissions Live is part of the Higher Ed Live network. Our episodes offer you direct access to the best and brightest minds in education. Be part of our live broadcast by sharing your knowledge. Participate in today's discussion by tweeting us using hashtag HigherEdLive. All of our episodes are free and easy to access in the video archives at higheredlive.com, or take Higher Ed Live with you on the go by subscribing to the podcast. Admissions Live is sponsored by NRCCUA, producers of the weekly EduVentures Wake Up Call newsletter. Subscribe and get weekly updates on the most pressing issues and trends in higher education, and I'll tweet out a link so you subscribe to that today. The third annual Myth-Busting Survey, sponsored by Higher Ed Live, NRCCUA, and M. Stoner, is underway. This year's focus is myth-busting enrollment marketing. We want to understand how you effectively reach prospective students and what encourages them to apply to your institution. The survey takes about 15 minutes to complete, and we are tweeting out a link now for that, and we'd appreciate you sending us your feedback there. Very excited about today's episode of Admissions Live. I've been wanting to have Liz on for quite a while. We had a conversation not too long ago where she introduced the idea of social listening to me, and it essentially blew my mind. So it was only a matter of time that I wanted to have her on this show so she can better explain it, certainly to the masses. I've been following Liz a long time on social media. She has a great website with a lot of great resources. We'll get that tweeted out as well. But she's just a wealth of knowledge, and I think you guys are really going to get a lot out of this episode. Again, if you have questions, and they're definitely going to come up during this episode, please tweet us today during the episode at hashtag HigherEdLive. I'll monitor that hashtag during the episode. And if there's a question I can get over to Liz and she'll answer it live, she'll be happy to do so. And that'll just add to the conversation. So I want to get started with a couple of just general questions, Liz, if you don't mind. And why don't you just introduce yourself and give us a little bit of background about what brought you to this point in your career, and what about social media and social listening really prompted this to become a huge part of what you do?
Sure. So my career started in university housing at UW-Milwaukee, where I was the program outreach coordinator, in charge of all things communication, from orientation, presentations, to the website for the department, and posters in the residence halls. So how to reach college students has been on my mind since I took that job in 2005. And towards the end of my time there, 2008, 2009-ish, I started doing what a lot of folks are still doing today, using Facebook and Twitter to communicate with our staff, our current students, our incoming students, and jumped into social listening in a very basic way back then. So I would search Twitter for the mentions of UWM and housing or dorm or residence hall, and I actually had cobbled together a poor man's social listening tool and had it feed into an RSS reader. RIP Google Reader. So that was the first foray into social listening. I was fortunate enough to get moving on up and out in the world, and went to UW-Waukesha, where I was the director of marketing and communications. And honestly, I only applied for that job because they wanted someone who would create a social media strategy for their campus, in addition to all of the other things a marketing and communications director does at a small two-year campus. So I did a lot of stuff on a shoestring there, again, cobbled together social listening, and was drooling over some of those enterprise social listening tools. At the time, Radian 6 was the Cadillac of all of them. This was 2011, 2012, and just wishing one day I would have the budget for it at that institution. And then in 2012, I heard from Great Lakes, my current employer, and they wanted me to come and start a social media strategy for their entire company. And they were working with in-school borrowers of student loans. And they had about 2.5 million students that they needed to reach to help them understand the company, understand student loans, and surprise, surprise, emails and letters weren't working. So they thought social might be a thing there. So I got to start something from the ground up, and I took the jump from campus and came over and worked at Great Lakes with students and professionals in a different capacity. But when I got here, there were so many other concerns related to social media that had to be addressed other than engaging students. So we had to worry about corporate reputation. We had to worry about tracking our brand. We had to do a lot of proactive customer service. And that was when I realized it was time to jump into the enterprise social listening space. So we got our first tool in 2013. I got what I thought was the Cadillac at the time, Radian 6. And we have since switched our solution a couple times throughout because that space is changing dramatically with technology. So I've been using social listening now, not just in all those use cases we talked about before, but also in my new role as Market Insights Manager at Great Lakes. So I actually use social listening to do research on a variety of topics and audiences, just using the publicly available conversation online, and starting to do a little bit of work to help campuses do that as well. So I find myself sitting in Madison, Wisconsin at a company that is known most for being a student loan servicer, doing social listening in higher ed and having a great time.
That's very cool. And so everybody that's listening, you probably caught certainly what I caught, and saying when you do a Twitter search of your institution, that is not enough. And we're certainly going to get to that because I think a lot of people think that's what social listening is. So why don't you break it down for everybody? If you can use layman's terms, that's great. But give us kind of your definition of social listening.
Sure. Well, just so that we're all on the same playing field about why I'm so super jazzed about it, the idea that I'm working with is that the conversations among the general public are influencing organizational strategy, brand strategy, and individual decision making more and more than ever before. Recent research from the Edelman Trust Barometer is showing that individuals trust people like them as a credible expert as much or more than they trust an academic from your campus, and absolutely more than they trust a CEO or a non-government organization, or heaven forbid, a public official. So knowing what's going on out there is incredibly important to campuses and organizations. And what I would say in layman's terms, we're all laymen, I'll say that. Social listening is finding all of those conversations that are happening online, transcribing them, searching them, categorizing them, and analyzing them to provide your organization with the insights that you need to support data-driven strategies in a variety of areas. So it goes well beyond the finding and helps you get to what matters in those conversations.
Okay, so I think that's a great place to start. But all right, so now take off your layman hat and let's put on like maybe the nerd hat. I mean, what is the Web 2.0, your backroom dealings with other people that know, the ins and outs of this history? How do you guys describe it?
So when I hang out with my social listening nerds at social listening conferences, because those are a thing, we talk about all the different ways that we can write our Boolean queries, which is the logic you use to make your social listening query find exactly what it is you want. We talk about how certain sites on the internet are indexed, and if we're getting the title data or the content data or the metadata, because all of that influences what we're doing. And then we get all research nerdy and talk about all the different ways we're creating rules to categorize our data and analyze it and get the insights that matter. And that's really where my research training from grad school pays in this, because it's not just finding all this stuff, it's what you do with it. And when you bring that researcher mindset, your nerd language starts to look a lot more like statistics and qualitative data analysis. So a lot of folks at home could probably play in that pool.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So when I talk to people, particularly on the marketing side in higher ed, particularly on the small institution side, and even bring up social media, it's still like this really touchy subject because they're not quite sure, particularly in administration, if they're doing it right or if their people in their area are doing it right. So now we're throwing this added layer of social listening on top of a strategy that may or may not be in place at many institutions. So where does social listening fit into the greater social media strategy?
Sure. I would actually argue that social listening fits more into higher level institution strategy, like strategic plan type stuff, than it does your social media strategy. So when I talk about social media, it's how are you going to use the channels available to you, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, what have you, to accomplish your strategic goals on campus. Whereas social listening is how are you going to harness and capture and identify intelligence from all of the online conversations about your institution to impact your goals that might be recruitment, retention, brand awareness, things like that. So a campus can be really great at social listening and have nothing going on in terms of social strategy, or they can be really great at social strategy from a content and an engagement perspective and have nothing going on with social listening. So it's a little bit unfortunate that the term social is even in it, but it's something that I think, again, recognizing the influence of the crowd and general opinion right now, it's definitely part of any strategy where the voice or the opinion of the people you're trying to reach is important.
Right. Okay. I think that's a really important point, because I think when most people think of this, again, my morning routine consists of, checking my Google alerts about my institution, doing the search function in Twitter, doing the search function in Facebook to see if anybody's talking directly about us, and maybe or maybe not putting in intervention in some of those conversations. But that's not necessarily this. So to help me and help the audience understand the difference between what we're doing now, which is a general search for social media interaction or mentions, and social listening.
Sure. So if you're using Twitter search, if you're making sure you check notifications coming through in Twitter and Facebook, right now I think that's pretty akin to checking your email. You're just seeing what people are saying to you, and occasionally on Twitter search, a little bit about you. Social listening is going so much further than that, and it goes further in a few different ways. So first, if your daily routine is Google Alerts and Twitter search, social listening would help you cover more sources. So you would also be looking at any publicly available discussion forum on the internet, or any blog on WordPress or Blogger, any comment on any news story anywhere, but essentially anything that's being published in real time online in like that sort of RSS feed format. So you're going to find more sources of information. And then you also can throw in that more sophisticated query. So if the name of your campus just so happens to be the name of a school that's in a local high school district, and the name of your city, and the name of a county, and all
Where are you getting this example?
I have no idea. That can make it a little bit more complicated. Or if the name of your company is something like Great Lakes, Lake, and a brewery, and a credit union, and a lot of other things, a college actually, you need to refine that query. So adding, what they would call, I'm going to use nerd words again, adding proximity parameters. So I only want, say, Bloomfield within 3 to 5 words of college or campus or something like that.
Right.
And then adding a whole bunch of exclusionary terms and adding a lot of ands and ors, that can really get you a query that narrows down what could be an incredibly overwhelming amount of situation. So find more sources and get a better query. Okay, you wanted to pause there, I could tell.
No, but I don't want to, because I'll forget if I don't ask you now. But so you mentioned like these sites outside of, whatever, everybody knows Twitter, everybody knows Facebook and but what are those blind spots? I mean, so where are people not looking? And you mentioned blogs and message boards, but is there anything in particular where colleges are just completely overlooking these sites as a source of information?
Yeah, so message boards are huge, particularly in some of those niche areas of academic programs. So when I'm helping out campuses with social listening queries, if they have a medical school, I'm finding comments on student doctor forums and all nurses forums. There's a top lawyer, like top law schools online forum where people are talking about their choices of law schools online. There's the comments in vloggers' YouTube videos, because every high school kid seems to be a vlogger these days, and they're talking about where they're going to go to college and putting those in there. Reddit, definitely Reddit. And then the things that you may be more familiar with, like College Confidential, stuff like that. In the UK, the student room always comes up really high. So forums can be a big thing, particularly if you're interested in any sort of athletics conversation on your campus. There are dozens and dozens and dozens of specialized forums, and I'm amazed at the number of people who spend their days talking about like the senior prospects on the high school basketball team and what college they're going to choose. So there's a lot of information out there in all those other areas as well.
So you talked about, this shouldn't necessarily live with a social media coordinator on a college campus, and I completely get that. But talk a little bit more where it should live. I mean, is this an administrative function? are there particular areas on a college campus, whether it be enrollment management, whether it be housing, as you mentioned earlier, that need to be, really taking a much more detailed look at this?
Yeah, so I would say there's where it should live, which I have opinions on, but I'm not about to dictate, and who can benefit from it, and those are definitely two different areas. So where it should live will vary campus to campus, but it should be somewhere that has some decent analytical capacity as well as strategic vision and alignment, things like that. So, your prior question, Adam, was what's different with social listening? If you want to get even deeper, once you've found all of those things, you have to be able to do something with them. And when I talk about social listening, I'm talking about tools that allow you to look at data both in the aggregate, so the tens of thousands of mentions about your institution over the last 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, as well as drilling down into individual mentions. And when you start to think at data, you have to be able to provide your own analysis framework to make that data valuable to you. So folks in marketing and communications might be interested in what percentage of the conversation is owned that we drove through our branded accounts versus earned, other people talking about us, either PR, prospective students, whatever. You might want to segment conversations into categories based on subject matter that's important to you, your strategic plan, your brand pillars, any of those things. You might want to segment audience segments. So all of that takes an analyst and somebody that really has that research mindset to organize. Some of it's quantitative, some of it's qualitative. So it should live where someone can do that if you want to make really good use out of it. But as far as who can benefit from it, I've had conversations with a lot of folks in the last 6 to 9 months about this, and there's tons of areas that can benefit on campus, but there's 3 that really rise to the top. One would be enrollment management, why we're talking today, can contribute to admission strategy, recruitment strategy, retention strategy. The next I would say is where I used to live on campus, marketing and communications. You can do brand tracking online with social listening. It could definitely help you understand your public relations efforts a bit better than maybe standard media tracking does. Can definitely inform content strategy based on analyzing conversations, and can be a great tracker for reputation management and also the chance to get out in advance of any potential reputation issue. And then I would say the third area is alumni affairs. It's a great way to identify alumni-generated content. So a couple of the schools that I've been working with recently, I've found that they have reporters in niche publications that have a great influence in, say, like a home building market or an entertainment market, where they might have programs that produce really great people in those areas. And they have alums that are writing regularly and identifying the school in their author profile that maybe wasn't brought up to the attention of alumni affairs yet. Can also be a great way for alumni affairs to proactively connect with alumni, maybe build some content strategy around development, and then do some audience analysis if they want to know the difference, say, between local alumni and alumni that have moved to other metropolitan areas. Those are the 3 real functional areas that have kind of come up as benefiting a lot from social listening.
Yeah, I can speak to the enrollment management side of things, and just speaking to my peers, particularly again at the small private college level. We don't have one of you on our campus to be able to do a lot of this analysis. So I think VPs for enrollment like myself, even director of admissions, director of marketing on these campuses where there may be only one of them, I think have been slow to learn these type of strategies. And I think, you introducing this topic and getting it out there in higher ed has been a benefit, because people are now talking about it much more than they were certainly 2 or 3 years ago. And this wasn't even a thing 5 years ago, or at least in higher ed. So I think that's a huge benefit. But I think, I can already tell the issue, and, the resource issue, bringing in a high level, close to a CIO level person, I would imagine, to be able to do this type of analysis, I think is going to be huge. So that's certainly probably that next phase of discussions that we have to have in higher ed is, how much value can we attribute to this? Because we're missing so much data that's coming through that we can use to our advantage, not only on the individual student basis, which is always good at a small school. Someone's talking on a message board about transferring out, and you can intervene by communicating with that student. That's great. But what you mentioned with the reputational, I think, is even more important. And I'm really interested in this because, again, being in a small school in a very saturated market in terms of higher ed in New Jersey, we get lost in the shuffle a lot. So for me, it's almost, are are the people talking about me in a good manner? Are they talking about me in a bad manner? Are they talking about me at all? And I think that's a huge thing, because we get so much from the major social media outlets, but are students even talking about us on a message board? And can we move that? So if we don't think we're getting enough conversation on those kind of secondary venues, can we do enough to push that and then benchmark that to see if we're moving in the right direction? I think that's a huge advantage of something like this.
Yeah, and I've been trying and trying and trying to find a lot of examples from campuses that have, had the foresight to put that sort of resources behind it. There's not a lot of them. I know we'll get to some examples at some point, but I'm really trying to give folks the tools and the higher strategic understanding of this, so that they can have those sorts of conversations on campus. Because if you say our social media team needs to also do this, you're not going to have the budget, and you may not have the human resources that you need. So I'm working with a couple of campuses right now to hopefully pull together some case studies. And for the enrollment management folks, I will be at the ACRO Strategic Enrollment Management Conference this fall, and hopefully have some of those packaged up to tell folks what other campuses have been able to do when they do have some resources to put behind it.
And you're absolutely right. This is absolutely going to be dumped on the social media person, quote unquote, on campus. And you're right. I don't think it lives there. I mean, after talking to you, this is a much higher level position, a position that's driving strategy for the institution. So I think it has to be given that type of weight. So let's jump into, you mentioned some examples. So everybody loves kind of real world examples of this kind of stuff working out there in the field. So can you just kind of break a couple down for us?
Sure. So I'm really sad that I don't have a ton of high level strategic ones from enrollment management. Like I said, they're still working on it. But there are some really great examples of campuses that are doing that proactive social listening to jump out and chat individually with students who are thinking about enrolling. I had to go through and find some examples for a journal article I wrote with a colleague, and Johnson and Wales University is killing it. They're looking, finding mentions where they're talking about them, not to them, and having real interactions with students that are clearly sitting in the yield space. I would be remiss if I didn't mention kind of the little Twitter famous thing that happened in March with Taylor Baum in Missouri, where she went on 2 campus visits, Missouri State and Maryville University, tweeted her photo at the campus sign of both of them, and I think her message was something like, please send help, was the only thing she sent. But she tagged those universities in photos, and both of them had a crack team of social media folks going at it. And they started responding to Taylor, giving her helpful encouragement, giving them reasons why their campus may or may not be better than the other one she was choosing. What was amazing to see was once the campuses jumped into that conversation, their followers, their current students and alumni saw it too. So current students were telling Taylor why she would be such a great fit at Missouri State or at Maryville, and alumni were telling Taylor. And if you really dug into it, because this is what I do at home, as I sit on the couch and I watch people tweet, Taylor's dad was favoriting a bunch of these tweets. So the whole entire family was involved in this conversation. And do I know if social led to Taylor's announcement after that she was going to go to Maryville? I don't know. But the exposure that incident had for those 2 campuses was huge. So it was really, really neat to watch. For alumni, I actually was able to reach out to the development team at Western University, our friends up north in Canada. And they did some social listening among the times that their alumni account was in its takeover phase. So they do Mustang takeovers. They have an alumni take over the account regularly. And they looked at what topics came up in conversation during takeovers. And they saw that people were always talking about this sense of residence and place of where they lived when they were at campus. And then they also talked about this overall feeling of support and kindness at the university. So they took these little social listening insights and they mashed them up against their goals, which of course makes my heart sing because I'm very goal driven. And they have an alumni student connector initiative, connect students meaningfully with alumni. So in order to test their little hunch, they threw out one tweet on the alumni Twitter account and said, hey, do you remember what room you lived in? And they were flooded with responses right away of every alum remembers not just their residence hall, but their room number. So they took that data, mashed it up against the alumni student connected Connector Initiative thought about what it means to be kind at Western University, and they came up with this campaign called Kind Mail. So if you search hashtag Kind Mail, you'll find it online. And Kind Mail was getting alums to send a personalized postcard to the person who lives in the room they used to live in during finals week, giving them just, a sense of support, and then suggesting that they connect later. And the alumni relations staff did a ton of work to make sure that that happened. But they had 1,400 kind mail postcards sent out, and they went from idea to execution in 3 weeks just because they noticed a trend on social listening. And you can totally read up about it online. If you Google Kind Mail, you'll come to their website, and they won a bronze award from CASE for the way that they brought data and strategy into their social program. So just one little thing that totally changed how their alumni were engaged with the university and also got them a ton of positive press.
Yeah, that's a pretty amazing example. I'm racking my brain. I cannot remember my dorm room number, my first dorm room. I think I'm getting too old. It's gone. 110.
But you remember the hall, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, I got the
so they would have directed it to the hall at least.
Yeah. No. So those examples are great, and thank you for sharing those. I think the one that you mentioned about Johnson and Wales, I wanted to ask you and see if you know this answer. So when they're finding out specific student information, when they're talking about Johnson and Wales online, how are they using it? So is the goal to communicate with them on the same platform in which the student is putting out that information? Or are they just using more traditional means of saying, okay, he or she is talking about us, we found it, now let's use their cell phone number, let's text them, let's email them? Or is it, we found it here, let's communicate with them here on this platform?
So what I was seeing from the outside looking in was they were responding immediately within the platform where the student mentioned them. What they were doing behind the scenes and if that altered their comm flow or anything else, I'm not sure. I haven't investigated, but now I totally should. And I will. If you're watching Johnson and Wales, I'll come for you. So they were using it as an in the moment idea, but you and I have talked about this, previously. If you can figure out that student's actual identity, if they're using their real name or something identifiable, and start to match that with your CRM or whatever else you're using on campus, you could have some more personalized communication strategies, because you could learn from their Twitter profile, per se, that they're really interested in a certain sport, that maybe they're not going to play at the collegiate level with your campus, but they're going to want to be involved in the club team, or they have an interest in history and they volunteer at the local history museum. Well, maybe you can connect them then with appropriate programs or resources on campus. It's just that little bit more of intelligence that could make you stand out among the crowd of folks that are trying to get that admissions deposit.
And it seems like such a good tool to use for qualification. I mean, one of the biggest issues that we have, and I know a lot of my peer schools have, is an inflated inquiry pool now. You're getting so many inquiries from so many different levels. So many of them are soft inquiries. To be able to put another layer on a student contact file and say, okay, they're talking about us online here, here, and here, and be able to score that, and then be able to hand that over to the admission counselor in charge of that territory and have them prioritize based on that level of engagement. I mean, we do that now with email open read rates. We do that with campus visitation. But I don't think many people are doing it with the amount of times they're mentioning an institution online. And if we can somehow, organize that and really put it to good use, I mean, that could save a ton of time for admission counselors, because they know, to a certain extent, the student's already interested. And so the conversation is much different at that level.
Yeah. And, not every single campus is going to see, thousands of people talking about their campus. This is totally, cultural from campus to campus, community to community. But there are those campuses with incredibly engaged students that are doing a lot of stuff on digital, and this will pay off a lot for them. And for the ones who aren't out there, like you said before, I think at least it's worth checking and seeing if that's an opportunity for your campus or something that could be cultivated down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think it's invaluable. And I think that's what, particularly recruiters, I mean, that's what they want. They want that intel, and they want it on their desk, and then they'll run with it. But it's hard for them to gather the intel and then, try to yield the student on top of it. So I think a lot of people that are listening to us today probably do not have a strategic social listening strategy currently in place at their institution, or they may not know about it. But What if someone wanted to jump in this field? Where do you start with putting a strategy like this in place?
So I want to quote my friend Amanda Costello at University of Minnesota: "Tools before strategy, heads for a tragedy." So I think people get way too excited about what tools they should get, how much they cost, what the contract looks like, without thinking about how this will strategically fit in the institution. So forget the term social listening. Just think about public opinion, and in what ways could having a better handle on public opinion impact your strategy at the institutional or the departmental level. And when you have an idea about that, then you can start to get buy-in from campus of saying, wouldn't it be great if we knew if these conversations were happening, and if they were, we were able to take action or identify insights that would help us impact our strategy. And once you start to get that buy-in, to start looking for the right tool to help you. So as I said at the beginning of this, we've gone through 3 different tools at Great Lakes. I'm finally at a point where I'm very, very happy with the tool that I have. And I think the reason we got there is we developed a very methodical process about how we would determine our needs and what we needed before engaging with vendors to have them give us sales pitches. So I took what I learned from all my mistakes the first 2 times, and I put it in a blog post that I know you're going to be able to tweet out at some point. 8 steps for choosing your social media monitoring tool. It's really that goals-driven framework, and making sure that the providers of the tools are pitching you rather than just giving you their solid sales pitch that they give to everyone regardless of what your goals are. And you need that going in, because there's no less than 3 or 4 dozen players in this space, and a solid dozen that would be considered top tier. And which one is best for you is totally going to vary based on the goals that you've identified. But once you found that right tool, to build a strategic program with that right type of human resources like we talked about before. So the key is the strategy, the tool, the human resources, and then being able to spread the love to the rest of the campus that needs it. And that's probably a multi-year process for a lot of campuses to get that going. So we're talking about it now. I have some ideas, and if you watch in the next few months, I might be able to share some of those, because I want to be able to help campuses do that as quickly and as effectively as possible without making the mistakes that I've had the opportunity to learn from for the last 5 years.
So what level of expertise do you think someone needs to have in order to run with something like this? So let's say you're at an institution that's fully in, wants to get in this space, wants to put a point person on there. I mean, what type of skills does that person need to have in order to kind of jump in this, knowing that very few people went to school for this, very few people have done their own individual research?
So at a basic level, I need to understand how the internet works. And I say that because not everyone does. The community-driven internet, and where are people posting, what is public, what is private, so you can temper your expectations of what you're going to be getting back from social listening. Because I've had some folks say, well, I don't want the campus to know everything I post on Facebook. Well, that's the type of thing you're probably never going to get on social listening because of the way those privacy settings are set up. So know how the internet works, and then understand how to extract insights from data. So you're looking for someone that loves spreadsheets and charts and graphs and knows how to throw a research question up against data and pull out the answer. And then as far as, finding the right tool and all those things, you could go with a consultant if you don't have a lot of space in that, or you don't have a lot of experience in that space. There are a lot of campuses, particularly the CIO's office, that have a relationship with a Forrester or a Gartner and can get access to some of the industry reports on the leading software for this space, and maybe have a quick phone call with an analyst about your goals so you're better prepared to approach those conversations. And that's what I did in our last search. I had a 30-minute conversation with the analyst from the service that we subscribe to, and that helped a lot. But the person who's going to be in the trenches doing it just has to have that analytical data mindset and get the internet. If they get your business and your strategic stuff, that's even better. But someone else can help with that.
Nice. And the article that Liz referenced, it's a LinkedIn article. It's also on our website. I'm tweeting that out now. Definitely a good read, particularly for people that are just starting out and doing some research in this area. I want to talk a little bit about the non-believers the people that are still, questioning, how social media, how social listening, how integrated marketing fits in the higher ed space. What do you do to combat, the person that isn't fully on board, doesn't necessarily see the value in something like this? Are there metrics in place? Are there things that you're going to be tracking over the next several years that can really be used to show how important something like this is in higher ed?
Yeah. So I actually just had Mike Horn from the Terry College of Business at the University of Georgia, got to make sure I put all these words in the right order, share with me how he has been using social listening and some metrics to gain buy-in for brand tracking and brand supporting advertising for Terry College. So he tracks not only mentions of the Terry College of Business, but also two of their top business school competitors that they're always looking to grab students from. And there are three metrics that he's looking at that matter to him and actually have enabled him to get dollars for brand campaigns and then evaluate whether those dollars had an impact. The biggest one is share of voice. So you'll see this a lot in anything about social listening. If you are looking for your brand or your institution, as well as your peer institutions or your competitors, you can start to imagine a pie with pieces of the pie broken up to represent how much of the conversation each of you is taking up. So, and person, you want to own more of the conversation than your competitors. So you're looking for share of voice to increase. And when Mike got to Terry about a year ago, their share of voice was smaller than everyone else's. So he put brand dollars up against that, and he could track over time his share of voice growing based on the numbers or the dollars they were putting in the brand campaign. So that's something that brand managers would look at. Alongside of it, you might also look at the sentiment of those conversations, which these tools can tag, and then just the overall volume of conversation over time. Are you trying to get more people talking? And with social listening, you can quantify that, on a daily, monthly, quarterly basis. And those are metrics that we track at Great Lakes as well and have since we started our social listening program in 2013. You can also look at conversation broken down by owned versus earned. We talked about this before. So if your conversation grows, you want earned to be growing faster than your owned, at least after you get over your initial campaigns you might be running. You can also look at changes in topics over time. So one of the qualitative pieces of data you'll see out of a social listening tool is a topic cloud and a lot of different ways to organize that data. And on some of them, you can plot them and see what topics are fading and what are growing in popularity. So if you have certain, values or brand attributes that you are trying to get people to associate with your campus, you can actually watch if you're changing that conversation over time. So those are some of the ones that I would look at if I wanted to track things long term. Some PR folks might be looking at news hits and things, and you can get that out of a social listening tool as well. But those are some of the more useful yet somewhat nuanced new metrics that you can get.
So I love those. So I wrote those down just to reiterate those. So one, we have share of voice, which I just love that term. Own versus earned in terms of communications, and certainly the change in topics over time. I think those are three great areas to be taking a look at. And again, I don't think many institutions are currently, certainly daily, or this isn't a part of their everyday life. So great takeaway there. So we start the social listening campaign. Everything is going well. How do we use this information for good instead of evil? What's kind of the next step after you've kind of dipped into the pool where you're kind of closing the loop on these interactions with students and these more reputational conversations that are going on?
So when you shared this question with me in advance, my first thought was, what evil uses do you really have in mind, Adam?
I don't know. Let's move on.
Yeah, I know some people can think it's evil, like to be creepy and jump into people's conversations. I think we're over that. Brands have been doing this for a decade now, some of them. So people are used to people jumping into their conversations and responding. So don't worry about being like evil big brother if you're responding to a public conversation on a public forum. But as far as closing the loop and what you want to do with them, something that happens online or in social. So it's all about how have you connected the insights that you've gotten with the strategic minds in your organization so you can impact the goals you set out to have. So I definitely see these insights being able to inform campaigns, both the topic, and I'm saying campaigns in a general sense, not a fundraising campaign. Both the topic and the content that goes into the campaign, as well as the timing and maybe the media sources you're reaching out to, the networks you're using, because you can watch that conversation spread essentially on the internet and learn from it each time and do it a little bit better. Of course, you can identify those engagement opportunities, close the loop immediately with folks. But I definitely can see folks seeing, you can use it to plan your staffing. You can see peaks and valleys in social conversation. And particularly if you're using a student team to do your social staffing, it'll help you figure out when they're needed or identify when their downtime is, when they could be working on more content. Definitely can also inform where you go to engage. So one thing I hope we start seeing over the next 3-4 years is campuses that know they have a niche. They've got a great medical school, they have a great law school, they've got a great engineering program, and they're out there having authentic conversations with students in the spaces where they're already asking for that information, generally these discussion forums and blogs. And they're able to go out there and provide value to the conversation rather than just like throwing out a digital admissions postcard. More educated decisions so that they find the campus that's the right one for them.
So this is a little bit off topic, but I would love to get your opinion on it. So all the schools, particularly colleges, universities, they want to go viral, right? They want to come up with that idea, or it's fighting over a student, having a Twitter war about an accepted student, but that gives free publicity, free marketing, free advertising. So I literally think there's people kind of just sitting in their offices or talking with students and kind of how can we do something cool. I just watched something from my alma mater this morning in a football meeting. Some guy dunked on a little tiny hoop and dunked over somebody, and that made SportsCenter top 10, and they're getting all this free publicity for the football program, which isn't very good, just because of this, viral video. So, where does that live in a college's, or where should it live in a college's kind of marketing campaign and marketing strategy?
So that's a really good point. I would never promise a campus that they can go viral for anything, but you can definitely set yourself up to take advantage of any of those little things that have the chance of going viral, getting more attention, if only the right people were engaged or they were amplified at just the right times. So we talked a lot about collecting data and getting insights, but the majority of social listening tools are going to give you two other really important in the moment pieces of data. One of them is an instant alert whenever a certain topic is discussed or a certain person says something about your campus, where you might have a list of highly influential people that talk about you once every few years and you want to know immediately when they talk about you next. You could do that. The other is a little bit more of an artificial intelligence take on that. Signal. So when you use social listening tools over a period of time, it learns what normal conversation about the topics you're monitoring looks like. And when that changes, either because someone really influential jumped in, or there's a spike in volume, or the topic just totally went negative or positive, it'll tell you. If you're not in the tool, it'll just send you a message. So if a senator tweets about your campus, you'll know immediately. Or if 12 people have started to say positive things about something that no one was talking about yesterday, it'll tell you immediately. And then you can jump on that and get a little bit more traction there. So one time I saw that work, and I don't know if they're actually using a tool, but they caught it right away. Not this last year's commencement, but the one before. UW-Milwaukee did a video, when everyone was doing Justin Timberlake's video, and Justin Timberlake tweeted it. So they were on that immediately. It was all over the news. It was great. And the video featured their students. So that was amazing. A big miss that I saw just 2 weekends ago, it was this amazing coincidence that happened online. You all know about digital retargeting for admissions. Well, someone was reading George R.R. Martin's blog and they were digitally retargeted for Western Governors University. And their tagline is "Finish what you started." So the page was like, "Finish what you started, author of the Game of Thrones." And it got screenshotted and tweeted, and they didn't catch it. in time to capitalize. That was Saturday morning. They didn't catch it in time to capitalize on Sunday night's Game of Thrones like Twitter party. So these little things you can catch if you just get that little uptick in conversation, and social listening can give you a heads up when that's going to happen.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's a great story. So we're running out of time here, but I definitely want to get your thoughts on where this is going. You know, it's relatively new. You're an expert in the field. You're living this every day. But for someone kind of on the outside, what can we expect over the next couple years? And where do you think this social listening itself is going as a field, as an industry?
Yeah. Two big things come to mind. One actually would have totally had Western governors covered when that Game of Thrones thing came out, and that's image-based social listening. So the technology now exists to upload all the different versions of your logo into some of the better social listening software and do an image-based search online. So if someone just, say they tweet or post on Instagram, had a great time at the campus visit, this is going to be a tough decision. Nobody would know who that was about unless they're in front of the campus sign or wearing a campus sweatshirt or something like that. And social listening would pick that up and let you know, hey, here's a visual mention of your campus on social. And that'll also give you better share of voice numbers and brand numbers. I'm really excited about that one. And then the other, and you and I have talked about this, is once we get a handle on listening data looks like and how it's impacting campuses strategically, we will know better how we can mash that up against other data sets. So whether that's student data in the CRM to better inform communications, either for prospects or for alumni, for development campaigns, or whether that's marketing data, web data, other social data to just make smarter marketing, I think that's going to be huge. And I don't know how we're going to do it yet, but I think we're going to get there.
It's super interesting, and it leads me to another question. I want to get your opinion on this. Do you think there's going to come to a point where social media is completely open, where now you have these closed networks, quote unquote closed networks like Facebook and Twitter to a certain extent, LinkedIn? Do you ever think we're going to get to a point where these things are completely open and then social listening becomes a whole different animal?
I think they're always going to come hand in hand, you know? So Facebook has that opportunity to be the thing that blows it open because Facebook has decided they want to connect all the people in the universe to each other, right? Well, planet, not universe. Anyway, Facebook for aliens coming next year. But Facebook has also locked down a lot of the data unless you're targeting via advertising. So there's not a ton of great social listening data coming out of Facebook as far as individuals are concerned. So I don't think we're going to see something be completely open. What I do think we're going to see is continuing to have the proliferation of all of these different sites for all the different audiences. And if you're trying to monitor them one by one manually, it's going to become incredibly difficult, nearly impossible. So you'll have to be taking this wide look at the online conversation.
Awesome. Well, I mean, I'm completely blown away, even more so than our first conversation about this topic. I think this episode is just chock full of great information that people can actually use and really start, talking more about this on their college campuses. I think that's a huge part of it because there's still a ton of people out there that just have no clue that this is going on and are still way too focused on social media and are not taking that high level look at the way their college or institution is being talked about online. And I think it's incredibly valuable, particularly when you're in an uber competitive market, which almost all of us are at this point. Liz, I want to give you an opportunity just to put out your Twitter handle out there, put your website out there for everybody so they can learn more about you.
Sure. Follow me on Twitter, LizGross144, because 144 is a dozen, which is a gross. Not everyone gets that. I'm also on Facebook, facebook.com/LizGross144, Liz Gross on LinkedIn, and my website is lizgross.net. And I would love to hear from you if you're doing any of the things that we talked about today, because I love to share these examples of folks that are ahead of the game. I've got conference presentations coming up this fall. I can highlight your work. I'd love to. So give me a shout out if you've got cool stories to share.
Absolutely. And Liz is a tremendous follow on social media. I mean, she sent, a lot of her own unique information, but also just a great resource of putting out information about these topics online and very easy to find. Liz, this was fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us on Admissions Live today. We have to do this again soon because I know this is a field that's going to evolve very quickly over the next couple of years. But thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much.
As always, I want to thank M. Stoner. They make us go. And also a big thank you goes out to our program sponsor, NRCCUA. Till next time, everybody, thank you for tuning in to Admissions Live, and we'll talk to you soon.